Hello, and welcome to the first devlog for me in 2021. Up until the end of February, I hadn't participated in any game jams, but I always wanted to try one. After seeing many game jam videos pop up in my YouTube feed, I decided to find a game jam in late January and participate in one. And, well, was I in for a ride? I hopped straight into Jonas Tyroller's Wowie Jam 3.0, and this year's theme was Failure is Progress. I was excited to play around with this idea, and I knew there was potential with this theme. I spent the morning of the jam catching up with people and planning out ideas for the game. I eventually settled on the idea of trying to steer clear from getting into a relationship and messing around with what it means to win and lose in this context. I didn't want to make my game too complicated since I knew I had to do a lot of foundational work. Thankfully, this idea was simple enough for me to pull off, and I can always add extra things like power-ups to enhance the gameplay. I spent a good 15 minutes planning out the details and what I wanted to accomplish with this game. With that out of the way, I started up my editor, created a repository on GitHub, and started coding away. As an additional challenge, I decided to try out the Pygame library for Python to create my game from scratch. Thankfully, this jam lets me reuse assets and codes from other projects, which helped out a lot. I used a tile set I bought days before, and grabbed my starter code from a week prior when I was testing out what Pygame could do. This starter code helped me work out drawing levels with the tile sets in a file, in addition to basic player movement. I took this opportunity to start streaming on Twitch for the first time, and it was great. On the first stream, we worked on the basic game loop and core elements such as interaction with other entities and collision detection. When I signed off from the stream for the day, I continued working on collision detection so that the player couldn't escape out of bounds. Though it took much longer than anticipated, I felt confident that I made lots of progress for the game. The next day arrived and I was back on Twitch again. I started my day with creating basic classes for the power-up system. In the game, there are two power-ups, the pink heart, which adds love to your love meter, and the black heart, which does the opposite. Power-ups are activated when the player steps over them, and they cannot be activated again. After spending more time implementing the two different power-ups and creating the sprites for them in the game, I had them working as intended. I was experiencing an issue regarding debugging, however. How did I know the player's love meter? That led me to the next important part of the game, the love meter heads-up display. I needed to be able to see the player's love meter as I'm testing everything since juggling between a command line and the game would be cumbersome. I spent time working on a design that I liked a lot, which fit with the rest of the game. Nice. Now to get rid of the black squares and to replace them with sprites. I worked on getting the sprites to render, in addition to their animations, and, well... look at her go! I did get it right eventually. After that, I worked on displaying a small piece of UI above an entity to tell whether they rejected you. At this time, I made other scenes such as the main menu and game over scenes. I made another draft level to test that you could go to the next level when you go down the exit corridors, carrying over the love meter from the previous runs. In the process, I added background music from the free music archive and created sound effects with JSFX-R to add extra polish. Additionally, I added cheat sheets on the main menu to explain the available keys to use and what the objective of the game was. I was pretty confident with how the game was turning out thus far. I merely had to make sure I could distribute it and design more levels in the process to make it unique. I spent that evening working more on PyInstaller and ensuring that I was able to build for macOS, Windows, and Linux. Unfortunately, I didn't have the resources to digitally sign the Windows version, and I soon discovered that other players' antivirus software kept flagging my game as potential malware. Whoops. With that out of the way, I spent the next day solely on level design. I wanted to make enough levels to give a sense of randomness, but not too many to where I'd be spending all day making tons of levels that the player may see once in their playthrough. After all, I designed the game to be more arcade-like than a puzzle game like the Costume Master. I eventually settled on 6 or 7 unique levels. To make sure the game felt random, but not to a point where the player would keep getting the same level, I made a pseudo-random function that ignores the previous level. It's kinda like shuffling in iTunes. I spent the night working on the game's page, sprucing up the read first file with credits and important information, and getting a final build out. There we go. Got everything set up, and It's been about a week since the jam ended, and I've received great feedback in the meantime. In my initial design, I didn't make it clear that you had the option to ignore talking to other people, and then asking for a date would be like deal or no deal. I'm not sure how I would go about fixing this, but I could have made that clear. There were a couple of bugs that made movement feel awkward because of collision checks. As I played other people's games, I also noticed a free tile map editor called Tiled and its export abilities. I could have forgone making a custom level format with a parser and instead just used the levels that Tiled produced. Whoops. Speaking of levels, I could have added support for extra decor layers since the tile sets I had included different props that sit on top of tables. Overall, I had a great time making this game for my first game jam, and I'm pleased with how it turned out. I enjoyed working with Pygame to make a 2D game like this, and I'll keep it in my toolbox as I work on other projects. You can get the game on itch.io and from GitHub with the links in the description. If you like this project and this devlog, let me know with a like on this video. I hope to make more devlogs like this in the future.